My name is Rosa Williams, 32, and for 6 years I thought I had the perfect marriage with James. We built a beautiful life together in our Boston suburb home, complete with Sunday brunches and romantic getaways. But lately, something felt off. Every night after drinking the special tea James prepared, I would feel unusually drowsy, waking up with no memory of falling asleep. The strange phone calls, his late nights at work, unexplained absences. Last night, I made a decision that would change everything. If you're watching this from your living room, couch, or bedroom, drop a comment below and hit subscribe to follow my journey of how I uncovered a shocking truth that turned my world upside down. I met James Morgan at a pharmaceutical conference in Chicago 7 years ago. I was representing a major drug company as their top sales representative in the Northeast region. He approached me during the networking mixer, confident in his tailored suit, with warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. We started talking about the latest developments in cardiovascular medications, which was my specialty area. The conversation flowed effortlessly from work to personal interests, and by the end of the evening he had my number. Our courtship was a whirlwind. James worked as a financial analyst for Wakefield Partners, a prestigious investment firm, and his knowledge of the healthcare market impressed me. He would send thoughtful gifts to my apartment, beautiful arrangements of pink peonies, my favorite flowers, which he remembered from our first date. Every weekend he would plan elaborate dates from sailing on Boston Harbor to exclusive restaurant openings. His attention to detail and the effort he put into our relationship swept me off my feet. 8 months after we met during a weekend trip to Cape Cod, James proposed on the beach at sunset. The ring was stunning, a vintage oval diamond set in platinum that had belonged to his grandmother. Everything felt right, and I said yes without hesitation. We married in a beautiful ceremony at the Boston Public Garden in spring, surrounded by blooming tulips and our closest friends and family. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. We purchased a beautiful colonial home in Lexington, a charming suburb outside Boston. The house had everything we dreamed of: a spacious kitchen where we would cook together on weekends, a cozy living room with a fireplace for New England winters, and a large backyard where we talked about our future children playing someday. We traveled extensively during those early years. James surprised me with a trip to Italy for our first anniversary, where we explored the Amalfi Coast and ate gelato daily. For our third anniversary, we spent 2 weeks in Japan experiencing the cherry blossom season. These trips created memories. I treasured photographs filling our hallway walls, smiling faces and breathtaking backdrops, documenting our seemingly perfect life. In our social circle, we became known as the couple who had it all. We hosted dinner parties where James would showcase his surprising culinary skills while I prepared signature cocktails. Our friends would comment on how in sync we seemed, finishing each other's sentences and moving around our kitchen in perfect harmony. Some even jokingly complained that we made marriage look too easy. Throughout these years, I maintained close relationships with my sister Amelia and my best friend from college, Tara. Amelia lived just 20 minutes away with her husband and 2 children, and I would babysit my niece and nephew at least once a month so they could have date nights. Tara worked as a therapist in downtown Boston, and we kept our tradition of monthly lunches no matter how busy life got. These women were my anchors, the people I turned to with both celebrations and concerns. James encouraged these relationships, often suggesting I spend a girls' weekend with Tara, or offering to cook for Amelia and her family when they visited. His thoughtfulness extended to remembering their birthdays and buying perfect gifts, which only made me fall more deeply in love with him. Looking back, I can see the changes began gradually about 8 months ago. James started coming home later from work, explaining that Wakefield Partners was handling a major merger that required extra hours. His normally relaxed demeanor became tense, his shoulders tight with stress as he loosened his tie, walking through the door well past 8 o'clock most evenings. At first, I was nothing but supportive. I would keep dinner warm for him, listen to his work frustrations, and give him space when he seemed overwhelmed. We had always been a team, and I saw this as simply another phase in our marriage that we would navigate together. When weekends became interrupted by urgent work calls, I would reassure him that I understood even as disappointment settled in my chest as another planned outing was canceled. The distance between us grew subtly at first. Our morning conversations over coffee became shorter, his attention increasingly captured by his phone. The passionate intimacy that had always been a cornerstone of our relationship dwindled, with James often claiming exhaustion as he turned away from me in bed. When I tried discussing these changes, he would apologize sincerely, blame work pressure, and promise things would return to normal once the merger completed. I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative was too painful to consider. But as weeks turned to months with no improvement, doubt began to creep into my thoughts like unwelcome shadows. The man who came home each night started to feel like a stranger wearing my husband's face, going through the motions of our shared life while his mind seemed elsewhere. Despite these growing concerns, I had no idea how deeply the deception ran or how calculated his behavior would become. The first real warning sign appeared when James began a new evening ritual about 6 months ago. After dinner, he would insist on preparing a special tea for me, claiming it contained herbs that would help me relax after long workdays. The first time he brought the steaming mug to me, the gesture seemed sweet, thoughtful even. The tea had a pleasant, slightly bitter taste with notes of chamomile and something else I could not quite identify. "This will help you unwind," James said, settling beside me on the couch as we prepared to watch our favorite show. "My colleague Mark recommended it. His wife swears by it for stress relief." That first night, within 30 minutes of finishing the tea, an unusual wave of drowsiness washed over me. I remember struggling to keep my eyes open, the television screen blurring before me. I woke the next morning in our bed with only vague recollections of James helping me upstairs, murmuring something about me falling asleep mid-episode. "You were completely out," he said with a small laugh at breakfast. "Must have been more tired than you thought." The pattern repeated itself night after night. James would prepare the special tea, and without fail I would experience an overwhelming sleepiness shortly after drinking it. At first, I attributed it to genuine exhaustion, the accumulated fatigue from demanding workdays. But inconsistencies began to surface, poking holes in this comfortable explanation. One Tuesday night, I woke briefly at 2 a.m. to find myself already in bed, still wearing the clothes I had worn that evening, not my usual pajamas. Another time, I discovered small bruises on my arm that I could not explain, as if someone had gripped me too tightly. The most alarming incident came when my mother called one evening around 8 p.m., concerned when I had missed our weekly phone call scheduled for 7 p.m. According to James, I had been deeply asleep since before 7, something completely out of character for me. As these occurrences multiplied, James seemed increasingly concerned about my health, suggesting I was experiencing extreme exhaustion. He began documenting my sleeping patterns in a small notebook, which he showed me one morning over breakfast. "Rosa, I am worried about you," he said, his brow furrowed with apparent concern. "Look at this. You are falling asleep earlier and earlier, sometimes mid-conversation. Maybe you should see Dr. Winters. This level of fatigue is not normal." His attentiveness might have seemed caring to an outsider, but something about it felt off, almost performative. When I mentioned possibly skipping the evening tea to see if it was causing the drowsiness, his reaction was swift and strangely intense. "The tea has nothing to do with it," he said firmly. "If anything, it is helping you get the rest your body clearly needs." My sister Amelia was the first to express concern about the changes she observed in me. During a lunch at her home while her kids were at school, she placed her hand over mine and looked directly into my eyes. "Rosa, is everything okay? You have canceled our last 3 dinner plans because James said you fell asleep. You have dark circles under your eyes and you seem foggy, distracted. This is not like you at all." I brushed off her concerns, making excuses about work stress and poor sleep quality. But her words lingered in my mind, reinforcing my own growing unease. The financial discrepancies began when I was paying our monthly bills. As I logged into our online banking portal, I noticed several transactions I did not recognize, withdrawals of varying amounts, always under $1,000 from our joint savings account. When I asked James about them, he explained they were related to surprise home improvements he was planning for our anniversary, asking me to trust him and not ruin the surprise by investigating further. Wanting to believe him, I agreed, though a voice in the back of my mind whispered warnings I tried to ignore. A week later, attempting to check our credit card statement, I discovered James had changed the password to our joint account. When questioned, he claimed it was due to a security breach at his office, necessitating password changes across all his accounts. "I meant to tell you the new password," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It slipped my mind with everything going on at work." The most disturbing incident occurred one evening when James thought I was in the shower. I had forgotten my phone and stepped back into our bedroom quietly to retrieve it. Through the partially open door, I overheard him speaking in hushed tones. "She does not suspect anything," he was saying, his voice uncharacteristically cold. "Yes, I am handling it. No, not yet. The timing is not right. I need you to be patient." When the floorboard creaked beneath my foot, he ended the call abruptly. Entering the room, I found him with a forced smile, claiming he had been speaking with a colleague about a confidential client matter. The explanation seemed plausible given his work, but the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened nonetheless. These accumulating inconsistencies created a growing sense of unease that I could no longer ignore. The husband I thought I knew was being replaced by a man whose actions and words increasingly failed to align. Each night as I drifted into that unnatural sleep, questions swirled in my mind. Who was James speaking to so secretly? What were the financial transactions really funding? And most disturbingly, why was I experiencing memory gaps only after drinking the tea he so insistently prepared? These questions haunted my waking hours, creating an internal conflict between the woman who wanted to trust her husband and the increasingly alert part of me that sensed danger lurking beneath our seemingly perfect marriage. With suspicions mounting, I knew I needed more than just intuition to understand what was happening in my own home. I began researching my symptoms online during my lunch breaks at work, careful to use my personal phone rather than my work computer. The search results painted a disturbing picture, many pointing to the effects of sedatives or sleep aids, particularly benzodiazepines when mixed with food or drinks. Symptoms matched my experience perfectly. Sudden onset, drowsiness, memory gaps, waking disorientation, and in some cases the bitter taste I occasionally detected in my tea. Articles about drink spiking and medical abuse sent chills down my spine, but I needed more concrete evidence before confronting James with such serious accusations. Our medicine cabinet became my next investigative target. One morning when James was showering, I carefully counted the pills in his prescription bottle of Ativan, which his doctor had prescribed temporarily 6 months ago for anxiety related to work stress. According to the label, he should have had at least 20 pills remaining, but I counted only 7. The discrepancy was too significant to be explained by normal use, especially since James had told me weeks ago that he had stopped taking them altogether. For more expert insight, I arranged coffee with my pharmacist friend Diane, under the guise of catching up. After small talk, I carefully broached the subject. I have been researching sleep disorders for a work project. I lied, hating the deception but seeing no alternative. What happens if someone regularly consumes benzodiazepines without knowing it? Hypothetically speaking, of course. Diane's expression grew concerned as she detailed the potential dangers from developing dependency to dangerous drug interactions and long-term health impacts. Her expertise confirmed my worst fears, making the situation impossible to ignore any longer. Hypothetically, she said pointedly, this would be a serious form of abuse, possibly criminal. Anyone experiencing this should seek medical testing and contact authorities. Taking her advice to heart, I purchased a small camera disguised as a decorative clock for our kitchen bookshelf, positioned with a clear view of our living room couch, where I typically drank my evening tea. Setting it up while James was at work, I ensured it was virtually undetectable, blending with our other decorative items. To confirm my suspicions about being drugged, I ordered a home drug testing kit online, having it delivered to Amelia's house to avoid James discovering it. The morning after one of my unexplained deep sleeps, I collected a urine sample and followed the test instructions carefully. The positive result for benzodiazepines stared back at me from the test window, confirming what I had feared, but desperately hoped was paranoia. That evening, I casually mentioned my continued drowsiness to James, watching his reaction closely. I feel strange almost every night now, I said, stirring my dinner around the plate. Do you think I should see a sleep specialist? Maybe even get tested for narcolepsy or something? James barely looked up from his meal, his dismissal immediate. You are overthinking this, Rosa. It's just stress and exhaustion. Taking you to more doctors will only stress you further. His lack of concern when I suggested medical intervention only heightened my suspicions. The husband who had once rushed me to urgent care for a minor kitchen burn was now discouraging me from seeking help for potentially serious symptoms. A few days later, opportunity presented itself when James left his phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. Against every principle of privacy I had always upheld in our marriage, I quickly checked his recent messages. A thread with someone saved simply as S contained cryptic exchanges about meeting times and references to "after R is asleep." Most disturbing was a recent message. Got something special for your birthday. Can't wait to see you wear it. The final piece fell into place when I found a crumpled receipt in James' suit pocket while doing laundry. It showed the purchase of a woman's gold necklace with a sapphire pendant from an upscale jewelry store downtown dated just 2 weeks earlier. I had received no such gift, and our anniversary was months away. With mounting evidence, I confided in my friend Tara during a private lunch. As a therapist, she listened without judgment, her professional training evident in her measured response. Rosa, what you are describing sounds like a form of covert abuse, she said quietly after I had shared everything. The medication without consent is particularly alarming, potentially even criminal. You need to protect yourself, but safely. Have you considered a plan to confirm your suspicions definitively? Together, we crafted a strategy for what I would later call the night of revelation. I would pretend to drink the tea but dispose of it discreetly, then feign the drowsiness and sleep James had come to expect. From there, I would observe his actions while he believed me unconscious, hopefully discovering once and for all what was happening during my drugged sleep. As I drove home that evening, a curious calm settled over me. The uncertainty had been eating away at me for months, and despite my fear of what I might discover, the prospect of finally knowing the truth brought a strange sense of resolution. Whatever happened, at least, I would no longer be questioning my own sanity in a fog of manufactured drowsiness and gaslighting. The evening of my planned revelation began like many others, with James arriving home around 7:30, his manner more agitated than usual. He loosened his tie with sharp, jerky movements, checking his phone repeatedly as he moved through our kitchen. I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he prepared dinner, something simple he had picked up from our favorite Italian restaurant. "Tough day?" I asked, keeping my voice casual as I set the table. "The usual stress," he replied, not elaborating further. "The Wilson account is becoming a nightmare." Throughout dinner, James seemed distracted, checking the time on his watch with unusual frequency. After we finished eating, he cleared his throat and stood up. "I will make your tea," he announced, moving to the kitchen with unusual eagerness. "You look like you could use the relaxation tonight." I watched carefully from the corner of my eye as he prepared the tea, noting how he glanced over his shoulder to ensure I was not observing too closely. When he turned to retrieve the honey from a cabinet, I saw him quickly open a small pill bottle and drop something into my mug, stirring it thoroughly before adding the tea bag. My heart pounded in my chest, concrete confirmation of what I had suspected. It took every ounce of self-control to maintain my neutral expression when he handed me the steaming mug, the familiar scent of chamomile now sinister with its hidden contents. "Thank you," I said, taking the mug and placing it on the coffee table in front of me. "I am going to let it cool a bit." James settled beside me on the couch, turning on the television to a documentary we had been watching, though I noticed his attention remained on my still full mug. I deliberately avoided drinking, making excuses about it being too hot, until he eventually excused himself to use the bathroom upstairs. The moment he was gone, I quickly poured most of the tea into the large potted plant beside our couch, leaving just enough in the mug to appear partially consumed. I heard the toilet flush upstairs and hastily returned to my position, the mug now lifted to my lips, as James re-entered the living room. For the next half hour, I put on the performance of my life, gradually acting more drowsy and disoriented. I allowed my speech to slur slightly, my eyelids to droop, and my responses to his questions to become increasingly incoherent. James watched this progression with barely concealed anticipation, his eyes frequently darting between me and his watch. "You seem really tired tonight," he commented, his voice oddly flat. "Maybe you should just close your eyes for a bit." I mumbled an agreement and allowed myself to slump against the couch cushions. Eyes fully closed, breathing deep and regular as I had observed in sleep studies during my research. Through barely parted eyelids, I watched James studying me intently, waving his hand in front of my face and calling my name softly to verify my unconscious state. Satisfied that I was deeply asleep, James immediately stood and pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. His entire demeanor transformed the caring husband persona, dropping away like a discarded mask. "She is out," he said in a low voice that I barely recognized. "Coast is clear. You can come over now." The 20 minutes that followed were excruciating. I maintained my fake sleep while James paced the living room, repeatedly checking the window. Finally, headlights swept across our front window, and James hurried to the door, opening it before the visitor could knock. A woman entered our home, and even through my nearly closed eyes, I could see she was strikingly beautiful, with long dark hair and an elegant, confident bearing. She wore an expensive-looking dress that accentuated her figure, and as she stepped into the light, I noticed the glitter of a sapphire pendant around her neck, identical to the one from the receipt I had found. "Is she completely out?" the woman asked, her voice hushed as she glanced toward me with obvious disdain. "Sophia, relax. She will be unconscious for hours," James replied, pulling her into his arms for a passionate kiss that sent shards of pain through my chest. "I gave her the usual dose. She won't remember anything, just like always." I forced myself to remain completely still, fighting against every instinct to scream or lash out as I watched my husband of 6 years embrace this stranger in our home, wearing a look of desire I had not seen directed at me in months. "I am tired of this sneaking around, James," Sophia said, as they separated, her hand resting possessively on his chest. "How much longer before you tell her about the divorce?" My stomach clenched painfully at her words, but the true horror was only beginning to unfold. "Soon," James assured her, leading her to sit at our dining table far enough from me that they clearly felt safe to talk openly. "I have been transferring funds gradually so she won't notice. The offshore account is nearly ready." 2 years is long enough," Sophia complained, her voice taking on a petulant tone. "You promised me after the last business trip that you would start the divorce proceedings." 2 years? The words echoed in my mind like a physical blow. Their affair had been going on for 2 years, nearly a third of our marriage. While I had been building what I thought was our future together, James had been systematically planning his escape with another woman. "The timing has to be perfect," James explained, his voice taking on the calculated tone I recognized from his business negotiations. "If I rush this, she could contest the divorce and discover the money I have been moving. Her family has connections, remember. I need to make sure she thinks the split is amicable, that she gets just enough to feel satisfied without looking too closely at our finances." "And the drugging?" Sophia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Was that really necessary?" "It's starting to feel excessive, James." He laughed, a cold sound I had never heard from him before. "It was your idea initially, if you recall. You were the one worried she would notice the late-night calls or check my phone. The sleeping pills just make everything easier. She does not ask questions about where I am going or who I am with. Plus, it gives me time to work on moving assets without her hovering over my shoulder." Their conversation continued for over an hour, detailing their relationship timeline, weekend trips taken while I thought James was at business conferences, and their plans for the future in excruciating detail. They discussed selling our house, which parts of our shared life James would discard, and even laughed about memories I had treasured. The most devastating moment came when Sophia casually asked about children, a dream James and I had discussed throughout our marriage. "Thank God you never had kids with her," Sophia said, twirling her wine glass. "That would have complicated everything." "I always found excuses to delay," James replied with a shrug. "I knew even back then this marriage had an expiration date. Rosa was good for my career. Initially, her family connections opened doors, but we have outgrown our usefulness to each other." Each word was a knife twisting deeper, revealing the calculated nature of his betrayal. This was not a man who had fallen out of love or made a mistake in a moment of weakness. This was systematic deception on a scale I could barely comprehend. As they continued talking, occasionally glancing at my sleeping form with casual disregard, I focused on controlling my breathing, fighting back the tears that threatened to expose my consciousness. Inside, I was shattering, but I forced myself to remain motionless, gathering every painful detail as evidence of the life that had been a carefully constructed lie. After Sophia finally left around midnight, with another lingering kiss at our front door, James locked up and headed upstairs without even checking on me. The moment I heard the bedroom door close, I allowed myself to move my body, shaking uncontrollably with suppressed emotion. I stumbled to the bathroom, barely making it before violent sobs overtook me. With trembling hands, I turned on the shower to mask any noise, then collapsed onto the cold tile floor, my mind reeling with everything I had witnessed. The betrayal was total, not just the affair, but the calculated drugging, the financial deception, the complete mockery of our marriage. After what felt like hours, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed like a stranger, her eyes hollow with shock and grief. But beneath the devastation, I recognized something else beginning to form: determination. Moving silently through the house, I retrieved the hidden camera from the bookshelf, confirming it had captured the entire evening. Then, with James still sleeping upstairs, I turned on his laptop left carelessly on the dining table. To my surprise, it was unlocked, his password manager automatically filling in his credentials as I accessed his email. What I found exceeded even my worst expectations. Emails between James and Sophia dating back over 2 years filled the screen, many containing explicit photos I quickly scrolled past, unable to bear the additional pain. Their correspondence revealed a relationship that had begun at a conference in Denver when I had been caring for my mother after her surgery. Financial documents showed transfers totaling over $300,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands, money systematically siphoned from our joint savings and investments. Most damning of all, I found draft divorce papers in his downloads folder, already filled with details that grossly understated our assets and painted a fictional account of our marriage breakdown that would limit my financial claims. The evidence was overwhelming. As the truth solidified around me, my body responded physically to the trauma. I barely made it back to the bathroom before vomiting, my stomach heaving violently as my world collapsed. When there was nothing left, I sat on the bathroom floor, numb and hollow, until an overwhelming need for support overcame me. At 3:42 a.m., I called Amelia, my voice barely audible as I struggled to form coherent sentences. "I need you," was all I managed to say before breaking down again. To her eternal credit, my sister asked no questions, simply stating, "I am on my way," before hanging up. 20 minutes later, she arrived using her emergency key to let herself in. She found me still sitting on the bathroom floor, clutching James' laptop with the incriminating emails displayed. Amelia helped me to the guest bedroom, listened in horrified silence as I recounted the night's events, and held me as fresh waves of tears came. By dawn, we had formulated a preliminary plan, transferring copies of all evidence to Amelia's secure cloud storage and discussing immediate next steps. James' reaction when he came downstairs at 7 a.m. to find Amelia sitting with me at the kitchen table was one of complete shock, quickly masked with false concern. "Rosa, what's going on? Why is Amelia here so early?" he asked, his eyes darting between us. The confrontation that followed was both the most difficult and most liberating moment of my life. With Amelia by my side as witness and support, I laid out everything I knew, everything I had seen and heard. "I know about the sleeping pills in my tea, James." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I know about Sophia, the affair that has been going on for 2 years. I know about the offshore account and the money you have been stealing from us." His initial reaction was predictable denial, his hands raised in confused innocence. "What are you talking about, Rosa? You are not making any sense. Did you have some kind of nightmare?" "Stop lying," I said, sliding his laptop toward him, the emails between him and Sophia clearly displayed. "I heard everything last night. I saw everything. I was not asleep." As comprehension dawned that his carefully constructed deception had collapsed, James' transformation was chilling. The mask of concerned husband fell away, completely replaced by cold fury and then calculating damage control. "You went through my private emails. You spied on me," he accused, attempting to flip the narrative. That is a violation of my privacy. Those emails can be explained. The money transfers are for legitimate investments. And drugging your wife, Amelia interjected, her voice sharp with anger. Is there a legitimate explanation for that too? James' face hardened, all pretense abandoned. You have no proof of that. Your word against mine, and frankly, Rosa, you have been acting erratically for months. Anyone would testify to that. It was then I played my trump card, pointing to the hidden camera still in place on the bookshelf. Actually, I have everything on video. Last night and many nights before. I have the drug test results. I have all the evidence of financial fraud. It is over, James. The look that crossed his face in that moment revealed the true man behind the charming facade, a glimpse of something so cold and foreign that I instinctively stepped back. In that instant, I realized I had never really known the man I married, and the revelation was both devastating and strangely freeing. The days following the confrontation unfolded in a blur of practical matters and emotional aftershocks. With Amelia's insistence and support, I moved out of our shared home that same day, taking only essential personal belongings and important documents. The home I had lovingly decorated, the space where I had built what I thought was a life together, now felt contaminated by deception. My first appointment was with Diana Goldstein, a divorce attorney Tara recommended, known for handling complex cases involving financial deception. In her office overlooking Boston Harbor, I laid out the evidence I had gathered from the video recordings to the financial documents and emails. This is one of the more egregious cases I have seen, Diana said, her expression grim as she reviewed the materials. The drugging alone constitutes a serious crime, potentially assault, or even attempted poisoning, depending on how the DA wants to approach it. The financial fraud gives us substantial leverage in divorce proceedings. Following her advice, I filed a police report regarding the drugging, submitting blood and hair samples for comprehensive toxicology testing. The detective assigned to the case, a compassionate woman named Detective Rivera, explained that such cases were unfortunately more common than people realized. The tests will show a pattern of exposure over time, she explained as she carefully bagged the remaining tea and the bottle of Ativan from our medicine cabinet as evidence. With the video evidence and your medical results, we have a strong case for criminal charges. The medical examination revealed what I had suspected: signs of prolonged benzodiazepine exposure that had fortunately not yet caused permanent damage. The doctor expressed concern about potential dependency issues and prescribed a monitoring protocol to ensure I did not experience withdrawal symptoms. You are lucky you discovered this when you did, Dr. Patterson told me during our follow-up appointment. Long-term, unmonitored administration of these drugs can cause serious neurological and psychological effects. With Diana's guidance, I engaged a forensic accountant to trace the full extent of James's financial deception. Thomas Chen, with his methodical attention to detail, uncovered layers of financial betrayal beyond what I had initially discovered. Your husband created a complex web of transfers and false investments, Thomas explained, pointing to a flowchart of transactions. Beyond the Cayman account, there are holdings in Luxembourg and Singapore. He has been systematically moving marital assets for approximately 28 months, totaling nearly $580,000. The discovery process also revealed other secrets James had kept hidden during our marriage. His gambling debts at an exclusive Boston club amounted to over $50,000, carefully concealed through creative accounting. His position at Wakefield Partners was actually in jeopardy due to ethical complaints from clients, something he had never mentioned despite using work stress as his constant excuse. Most painful was the revelation that Sophia was not his only infidelity. Email records and hotel receipts indicated at least 2 other affairs during our marriage, shorter involvements that had apparently not developed into the long-term relationship he had with Sophia. Perhaps the most devastating personal discovery came when mutual friends began contacting me after news of our separation spread. Lisa and Marcus, a couple we had vacationed with annually, admitted they had seen James with Sophia at a restaurant in New York 6 months earlier, but had chosen not to tell me. "We did not want to get involved," Lisa said apologetically during an uncomfortable phone call. "We thought maybe you had an arrangement, or that it was a one-time mistake he would confess to you." Their willingness to protect James rather than warn me felt like a secondary betrayal, revealing how isolation often accompanies being the victim of deception. I realized many of our so-called friends had chosen the path of least resistance, looking away from signs that something was wrong rather than risking the discomfort of intervention. The emotional and physical toll of these discoveries manifested in alarming ways. I lost 12 pounds in the first 2 weeks, my appetite vanishing under the weight of stress. Sleep became elusive ironic, given that forced unconsciousness had been part of my recent past. When I did sleep, nightmares jolted me awake, heart racing, convinced James was standing over me with another drugged drink. At Amelia's insistence, I began seeing Dr. Levine, a trauma specialist, who helped me understand the psychological impact of what I had experienced. "What you are describing involves multiple layers of trauma," she explained during our second session. "The betrayal of trust by your spouse, the violation of your bodily autonomy through drugging, and the gaslighting that made you question your own perceptions. Recovery will take time and patience with yourself." Under her guidance, I began developing coping mechanisms for the anxiety attacks that would strike without warning, learning grounding techniques to manage intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. The therapeutic process was painful but necessary, each session peeling back layers of hurt while building new foundations of strength. During this period, support came from unexpected sources. James's younger sister Rachel reached out, revealing that she had distanced herself from him years ago due to similar patterns of dishonesty. "I am so sorry you experienced this," she told me over coffee, her resemblance to James momentarily jarring. "I saw the warning signs in how he treated previous girlfriends, but I hoped he had changed. I should have warned you." These connections became lifelines as I navigated the complex legal proceedings that followed. James predictably fought the divorce with aggressive tactics, hiring a high-profile attorney known for scorched earth litigation strategies. His initial response to the divorce filing included counter-accusations claiming I was unstable and had fabricated evidence against him out of jealousy. When the toxicology reports definitively proved the drugging, his strategy shifted to minimizing and justifying, suggesting he had only been trying to help with my supposed sleep issues. The financial evidence was harder to dispute, though his lawyers attempted to argue the transferred funds represented legitimate investments made with implied consent. Throughout this period, there were moments when the weight of it all seemed unbearable. The lowest point came after a particularly brutal deposition where James' attorney attacked my character and mental stability for 6 hours straight. I returned to Amelia's house where I was still staying and found myself standing in her bathroom staring at my reflection, wondering if fighting was worth the continued pain and humiliation. "I cannot do this anymore," I told Amelia that night, exhausted beyond words. "Maybe I should just take whatever he offers and try to move on." Her response was gentle but firm. "That is exactly what he is counting on, Rosa. That you will be too tired, too hurt to fight for what is rightfully yours. Remember why you are doing this, not just for the assets, but for the truth to be acknowledged." Those words became my anchor in the difficult months that followed, a reminder that beyond the practical matters of divorce settlements and criminal charges, this fight was ultimately about reclaiming my narrative and my power from someone who had tried to erase both. 1 year after the night that changed everything, I stood in the living room of my new apartment in Cambridge, surrounded by friends celebrating my fresh start. The space was smaller than the house I had shared with James, but entirely mine, decorated in bright colors and patterns that reflected my rediscovered sense of self. The journey to this moment had been neither straight nor simple. The legal battles had been grueling but ultimately successful. With the overwhelming evidence assembled by my legal team, the divorce settlement heavily favored me, returning the majority of the hidden assets and awarding additional damages for the financial fraud. The criminal case related to the drugging resulted in James pleading guilty to reduced charges of assault and reckless endangerment, avoiding a public trial, but resulting in a suspended sentence, substantial fine, and mandatory counseling. The outcome was less severe than many thought he deserved, but the public acknowledgement of his actions provided its own form of justice. My professional life had become an unexpected source of strength and renewal. 3 months after leaving James, I had been approached by a competing pharmaceutical company offering a position with greater responsibility and substantially higher compensation. The role challenged me to rebuild my professional confidence, which had been subtly undermined during my marriage. "You have completely transformed our regional sales strategy," my new director commented during my 6-month review. "The perspective you bring to the team is invaluable." These words meant more than she could know, validation that I was more than the victim of a devastating deception, but a capable professional with valuable contributions to make. The healing process extended beyond practical achievements. Through continued therapy with Dr. C. Levine, I confronted the deep impacts of James' betrayal, working through the trust issues that initially made even simple interactions with male colleagues anxiety-inducing. Group therapy with other survivors of domestic abuse, which my therapist helped me recognize my experience as provided community and understanding when I felt most alone. "Abuse does not always leave visible bruises," said Catherine, a soft-spoken woman in my support group. "The scars from psychological manipulation and violation of trust run just as deep, but they can heal with time and proper care." Rebuilding my personal relationships became a priority, strengthening connections with those who had supported me unwaveringly while establishing clear boundaries with friends who had failed to stand by me during the crisis. Some relationships could not be salvaged, the gulf of understanding too wide to bridge, but new friendships emerged through unexpected channels. Reconnecting with my authentic self led me to explore interests James had subtly discouraged, from taking painting classes to joining a hiking group that explored New England trails each weekend. These activities introduced me to people who knew me only as I was now, not as half of a seemingly perfect couple or as the woman whose husband had betrayed her so spectacularly. Through my support group, I began volunteering with a local organization that assisted women leaving abusive relationships, offering both practical advice on navigating legal systems and the emotional reassurance that life continued beyond trauma. Each woman I helped reinforced my own recovery, turning painful experience into meaningful support for others. The most profound healing came in learning to trust my own perceptions again. James' gaslighting had caused me to doubt my instincts, to question clear warning signs, creating a disconnect between what I observed and what I allowed myself to believe. Rebuilding that internal trust required constant practice, consciously acknowledging my feelings and intuitions as valid rather than dismissing them as paranoia. On the anniversary of my discovery, I read through the journal I had kept throughout the recovery process, tracing the evolution from raw pain to gradual healing. The early entries were almost unbearable to revisit, filled with confusion and self-recrimination. But as the months progressed, glimpses of strength and clarity emerged, small victories accumulating into transformative change. The final entry from the previous week read simply, "Today I woke up, and my first thought was not about him, not about what happened, but about what I am looking forward to creating today. Progress." Looking around at the friends gathered in my new home, I recognized that while the trauma would always be part of my story, it no longer defined my present or dictated my future. The woman who had been systematically deceived and drugged had emerged stronger, wiser, and fiercely protective of her reclaimed autonomy. The most important lesson I had learned was that healing is not about forgetting or minimizing trauma, but about integrating it into a larger narrative where it informs but does not control. The betrayal had taught me painful but valuable lessons about trust. Not that it should be withheld, but that it should be given mindfully with awareness, rather than blind faith. I had also learned that intuition deserves respect, that the quiet voice warning something is wrong should never be silenced by love or loyalty or the desire to maintain appearances. Those internal alarms exist for protection, and honoring them might mean the difference between remaining in danger and finding safety. Perhaps most significantly, I discovered that survival itself is an achievement worth celebrating. Each day I chose to continue fighting for justice, for recovery, for joy, despite pain represented a victory over the man who had tried to diminish me to an inconvenience in his carefully planned future. As I raised a glass with my gathered friends, I offered a toast that served as both conclusion and beginning, to trusting ourselves to second chances and to the strength we never know we have until it is tested. The journey ahead would still hold challenges, moments of doubt, and echoes of pain, but I faced it now with hard-won wisdom and the knowledge that I had already survived the unimaginable. Whatever came next, I would meet it as a woman who had reclaimed her story, her power, and her right to define her own future. Have you ever experienced a moment when your intuition was telling you something was wrong, but you ignored it? What warning signs do you think are most important to pay attention to in relationships? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and recovery. Thank you for listening, and remember to always trust your instincts. They're often trying to protect you.